The House will come to order.
The 2026 legislative session is underway in Montgomery. State lawmakers will have 30 legislative days to tackle issues facing Alabamians.
With the sound of a gavel, the 2026 legislative session is well underway. The House of Representatives and Senate met briefly today and considered resolutions. Besides getting budgets passed, House Speaker Nathaniel Ledbetter says lawmakers will be looking at the state's SNAP program and career tech initiatives.
I think it's to continue the work we've done in education. You know, Alabama's moved up over 20 points in reading and math, and more than any other state in the country, and that's certainly something that we're cognizant of and will continue to try to improve on. So that's definitely a priority.
And Representative Wanalyn Gavan says health care is a major concern.
We've got to figure out how to make Alabama affordable again. A lot of people are feeling the crunch from the different tariffs and things of that nature. And so we've just got to make sure that we are making sure that we're pushing an agenda, even in what could possibly be deemed as a lame duck session.
After 40 years in this state house, lawmakers are preparing to move to a new building next year with better facilities. Senate Pro Tem Garland Gudger says that move will allow more people to be a part of the legislative process.
It's time for us to do a new state house, and so we're moving forward, but we're looking forward to this session, doing what we need to do to make sure that we pass the bills that are going to make Alabama as efficient as possible, and then moving into the new state house next year.
Mr. President, have a resolution.
Gudger says that means prioritizing local bills.
If you think that we're always going to agree on everything, that's sadly mistaken. So I do think there'll be filibusters. I do think that sometimes causes issues.
And overcoming those disagreements, Representative Patrick Sellers says lawmakers need to invest in education.
Teachers are underpaid and overworked, and so schools lack resources while vouchers drain public systems. Every zip code deserves quality education.
But we got to make sure we balance empowering parents to make the best decision for the kids, but also ensure we continue to look at our public education, try to address the challenges we have within our school systems.
Now, with it being an election year, it is expected that lawmakers will have a speedy session. The House and Senate will come together for 3 days straight this week alone. And as y'all had already mentioned, lawmakers will have 30 legislative days to pass budgets and conduct other business. In Montgomery, Ryan Hall, CBS 42 News.
No representation is made that the quality of legal services to be provided are greater than the legal services of other lawyers. You have found the Heart of Dixie podcast. My name is Harry Steele. I'm an attorney down in Daphne, Alabama. I'm joined today by my co-host Brandon Mosley, who is a reporter and the content manager at the Alabama Gazette in Montgomery, Alabama. How are you today, Brandon?
Oh, I'm doing fine. How are y'all?
Good. We have a special guest with us today, Mark Thornton, who is a senior fellow at the Mises Institute in Auburn, Alabama. How are you today, Mark?
Good morning, Harry, and good morning, Brandon. It's great to be here. I'm doing great. Great to be on the podcast.
It sounds like you are a libertarian and a Austrian economist. Is that a fair way to put it? And you've managed several newsletters. You've written multiple books that are here in your bio. Is there, if there were a book that I needed to read of yours, would it be how Mises economic theory predicted everything? Is that your Fifth Symphony? Or yeah, are you most proud of your first book? Or, people have their books are their children. So I'm kind of asking you, which is your favorite?
Well, that's a great question. I am a libertarian, and I am a PhD economist, graduated from Auburn University a long time ago. And so I guess I'm most proud of my first book, which was based on my dissertation, The Economics of Prohibition. And that book has held up extremely well over time. And it's actually probably more important today than ever, because it explained really for the first time back in 1990 why drugs in the illegal marketplace become more and more dangerous and more potent over time. And this was a long time before crystal meth and fentanyl and all that stuff came onto the scene. So Austrian economists, when I'm part of the Austrian school, were very often criticized for being unrealistic and not being able to anticipate and predict the future. But in that book, basically, I did lay out the case that if government tried, more stringent enforcement, more penalties, more law enforcement officers, more border guards, that drugs would just become more and more potent and become more and more dangerous and become more and more deadly over time. So I guess that's the book that I'm most proud of because it's held up for so long. My most recent book is on the skyscraper curse, and that's where I apply the Austrian school's theory of the business cycle to the economy and to history, showing that Mises was right because it's his business cycle theory after all. And I incorporate the skyscraper curse into that book, which shows that there's this weird, eerie correlation between the building of a world record-setting skyscraper and a world economic crisis. And so that book hasn't not taken hold as much, but someday I think it's going to be held up high in its own right for being able to predict what's going on right now and into the future.
And so if I can nutshell for the dummies, Austrian economics, so Keynesian economics, you have economic models and statistics, and Keynesian is more the Socratic method where we use deductive reasoning to come up with what was Mises won. What award did he win? He wrote a paper in 1941 and said, you can't have communism because you have to have a market price, or the planners for the communist state can't even figure out whether their production outputs are worth the inputs if you don't have a market price.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So deductively, you can have all of these statistics you want, but if you can't reason your way into how we come up with the price of a bushel of corn at the end of the day, given our inputs, labor, fertilizer, all these things that Brandon knows about because he went to the Cal College too, and Brandon has a degree in agronomies and soils.
No, animal dairy science. Actually.
Animal dairy science. So biostatistics. So the worst thing I ever took at Auburn was biostatistics. So I'm with you. I don't ever want to do I can't even remember what mu stands for in economics or whatever, but I'll stick with the chemistry part of my brain where I keep equations. And on economics, I will agree with you that things like, let's keep rolling because the Mises case against Keynes is a article on your website that everyone should go read.
Yes.
And then your website has hey, if you're Harry and Brandon and don't remember jack shit about, I took macro and microeconomics, right? And I have an MPA. And that, of course, there are economic theories in probably every class that I took, but you understand what I'm saying. It's been a long time. So if you want to start at the beginning, you can go to their website and just click and read their little videos, good explanations. So this is one of your recent publications, Longer, Higher for Longer. Can you nutshell it for us about the production and wages and industrial revolution? And
Sure. And I think you started with a great point about Mises. That was really one of his first works, showing that socialism in its pure form was economically irrational and was really impossible. And he did that all using economic laws, reason, logic, and deduction without the use of statistics or mathematical models or computers or anything. And that's the Austrian school in a nutshell, where we use traditional approaches of logic, human reasoning. Some people say it's common sense, but it goes beyond that as well. Now, in this piece, longer, higher for longer, I'm just basically laying out the importance of the interest rate in the economy, what goes into the determination of the interest rate in terms of, how much is the Fed printing, how much is savings encouraged, how much is business wanting to invest, how much is the government borrowing. And basically what I said in that piece was that, we have all lived through a multi-decade period where interest rates have been declining over the long haul. Since 1980 to the end of last year, basically interest rates have been coming down and down and down. And what I was postulating, based on the logic of what's going on at the Fed, what's going on at the government budget, what's going on in terms of policy encouraging or discouraging savings by Americans and borrowing by Americans, that we could very easily be in for a long-term increase in interest rates moving forward, maybe for many decades to come. And so higher interest rates make everything much harder. It makes it harder for small businesses. It makes it harder for people to buy homes, which it's already, the government's made home buying incredibly difficult, created enormous barriers and difficulties for young Americans to form families and to buy homes and to start businesses, or even to invest in their children's education or their children's future, or their own retirement. So higher interest rates is something that we all need to be aware of, because it's going to have a really significant impact. And I'm not talking about, what happened in the first 2 weeks of January or what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks, but what's going to happen over the long haul, and what's going to happen to long-term interest rates, the rates that businesses consider before they make investments. And this, again, is crucial, because when businesses make investments and they buy better tools, they buy better computers, they launch new product lines and so forth, it means that they're going to be hiring workers and employing workers and setting wage rates at much higher levels. So everybody benefits when more money can go into capital investment in private firms, because that's where higher wages come from. And we're all interested in that. Even the government tax collectors are interested in that. And so I'm warning here in this piece that all this government borrowing and of course, the national deficit right now is out of control. The interest on the debt is skyrocketing straight up. If you look at it on a graph, it looks like it's going straight up. And of course, the national debt is $38 trillion. That's the basic national debt. It doesn't take into consideration the fact that Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are not funded for the future. And so that's all going to have to come out of the, come out of the economy at some point as well. And so these are perennial questions that Austrians have been asking. These are things that we're very concerned about, especially for future generations, the current generation that's just starting, the students that at Auburn University and the University of Alabama and Troy and everywhere else that are graduating and looking to get jobs and looking to start families and looking to buy homes and start retirement programs. This is the central question. And it's something that people in Washington, D.C., the power elites, our overlords that we don't control, they don't give a damn about any of this stuff.
Okay, so let's get to them real quick, because I wanted to talk a little bit about the economics of tariffs, which, by deductive reasoning, I think are probably not great for the overall economy. So Trump's proposed 10% credit card interest rate cap. That's in the news. But here's what I wanted to get to. So this is the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta's website. And this is their infographic that explains to you what they do, okay? The Federal Reserve is the central bank of the United States with responsibility for overseeing the nation's monetary system, right? Here's the structure. Any idea who the hell these people are, Brandon Mosley? You're a pretty well-informed fellow. There's only 12 boards of governors for the Federal Reserve Board.
Yeah,
one of them's in Atlanta, I believe.
I mean, most of the individual governors don't get a lot of press coverage. They
okay, but if you look at
given the amount of power they actually hold.
Okay, but knowing what you know about how many banks were in Birmingham, Alabama, knowing how many banks there are in New York, you can see the second district up there is basically nothing but New York State, right? Because they got so many damn banks or whatever. Okay, well, whoever this cartel is that's in charge of our money supply, these are these overlords you're talking about. And here's the infographic, but no pictures or addresses for any of these people. So the Federal Open Market Committee, okay, that sounds. Has anybody ever heard of FOMC or FOMC?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we have.
The stock market really hinges on their decisions as to what they want their rate to be.
Yeah, that's the central committee that sets interest rates in the economy, and they're supposed to balance their congressional mandate to balance unemployment and labor market conditions on the one hand, and the other part of the dual mandate is to manage price stability, which is price inflation. But they're, the central production of the Fed is that when they cut interest rates, they inject a bunch of money into the economy. They make it up out of thin air. And, they talk a lot about this congressional dual mandate, but that's really a farce. That's not really how the Fed operates. The Fed's dual mandate comes down to them from basically the power elite in American society, or even in the global society. And their two mandates are to protect Wall Street, or to help bail out Wall Street, and to provide Wall Street with the raw material, which is money. And the second part of their mandate is to monetize the federal debt, to buy up excess federal debt, and so that it doesn't make it into the economy and compete with the private sector.
Okay, so there
so how much debt? We owe 38 trillion. How much of the 38 trillion is actually held by the Federal Reserve?
Well, it's up there like $8 trillion is their balance sheet right now. Most of that is government debt of some, treasury bills and government bonds of various duration. The Fed also, for the first time in recent years, put 30-year mortgages on their balance sheet to help bail out the housing sector, back with the financial crisis and with the COVID emergency situation. They greatly increased their balance sheet after the great financial crisis and during COVID. There were massive expansions, which eventually gave us higher prices for consumers. And they told us that they would, oh, well, we'll just, let that stuff flow off of our balance sheet back into the economy. But they've been, they've been very slow.
Okay. So let me give you a Gen X story. So I leave public employment at the end of the financial crisis to move down here to practice law, and the damn BP oil spill happens. I can tell you a story about economic calamity that few people have endured. And I can tell you there's two things you need to watch on that are HBO movies. One of them's the band played on about Fauci and the AIDS bullshit. And the other one is Too Big to Fail. It is an absolute indictment of the entire system. And I don't know how in the hell this movie ever got made. I can't believe the producers weren't murdered in the parking lot like the octopus crime or whatever. Anyway, Brandon, I feel like I interrupted your thought.
No, I was interested in, what do we pay? Of course, they hold the debt. How much of our interest that we pay, that basically if we borrow to pay the debt we already own, we've already accumulated, how much of that is paid to the Federal Reserve in interest on the debt that they owe?
Well, I mean, a huge amount. And they use that money to fund their operations. And let me tell you, the Fed runs a very high, expensive system with all these district banks. They have a couple of thousand economists and statisticians, many thousands of employees, and everything is very first class, including the $2.5 billion renovation on their little headquarters.
Nice.
in
Trump
Washington.
That there's an investigation into the Fed chairman regarding, right?
I mean, I've never met, the idea that you could spend $2.5 billion on a renovation on anything is just, to me, and I'm sure many husbands across the state of Alabama, appalling. But that's what they're doing. They're used to, spending a lot of money on themselves because they get so much money in that they can't spend it all, and they have to turn it back to the Treasury. Now, in recent years, you probably heard that the Fed is paying banks for interest that the banks don't lend out. And so they're paying banks, 4 or 5% on money that the banks aren't using. And so the Fed has actually gone into the hole, and the Fed, even despite the fact that all this money is coming in, they're losing money, and the Treasury and the taxpayers have had to make up the difference. So an institution of government, the Fed, which was making money hand over fist, is now running red ink, and the taxpayers are having to pick that up. And of course, the Fed, they just dismiss that as part of, their monetary policy. They want to pay banks this interest without the banks having to take any risk and without them having to turn the money over, to private enterprise in the form of loans and so forth. So the whole thing has become chaos. I mean, it's almost an indictment of the word chaos, what is happening in Washington with the Federal Reserve, with monetary policy. And of course, Americans are waking up to all of this. Even other central banks around the world are waking up to the nonsense that's been going on in the United States and with the Fed and with the Treasury. And that's why everybody is running, hand over fist into buying gold, because nobody is trusting these people. They feel, I think correctly, that these people have malicious intent and that they don't really show any concern really for the American family and small American businesses. And so quite naturally, these foreign central banks have stopped buying U.S. government bonds and they're buying gold. And Americans and people all over the world are putting money into silver and gold, land, farmland, around the country and around Alabama. Actually, it's quite a popular thing now.
So let's talk about monetary restriction, the decision to take us off the gold standard, right? Because so to nutshell it, before we couldn't just print money. There was a finite amount of gold that we had in reserves, and we could only print as much money as we had gold that could be redeemed for it, right? So
that's correct.
Anyway, recently Brandon knows that I've been working on some walking sticks, and I went and bought some copper, large copper fittings to go on the end, and Richard Nixon just made me rich. Dude, I can't believe how much this copper's worth. And tin has gone through the roof. This isn't because it's worth that much. It's because our money is now worth nothing in comparison to the utility of copper, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and the expectations of people that prices are going to continue to rise at a higher rate than they have done traditionally, and that gold and silver and copper and uranium and nickel, all of the monetary metals, all of the precious metals, all of the rare earth metals, all of these things are going up, up, up and away.
Well, I own a big gravel bar. Is there any use for gravel yet?
Not
I got a place
yet.
on the river that's like a alluvial gravel bar where my camp is. And
Well, you
I
never
know
know.
one day they're gonna find something that's worth a damn on that piece of property. But so far,
Well,
no.
along those same lines, in 1946, President Harry Truman offered Denmark $100 million in gold to buy Greenland.
Oh yeah,
I ran that to AI, and $100 million in gold in 46 would be about 13.1 billion today.
Yes, and
yeah,
we,
but that same, but it had been that same amount in 1990 also. That's how much gold has appreciated since 1990.
Well, it was capped in the 40s at $35 an ounce.
Okay, well that explains.
yeah,
Something
and
like that.
the United States has basically been on the gold standard ever since the country started, and we were on silver in colonial times. And we became a world economic superpower based on a sound monetary system where the government wasn't really involved at all. It was an automatic system where the government could only print up paper to represent, the actual gold. And that did us well for a long time. After World War II, Americans couldn't own gold, but foreign central banks could trade our dollars for gold. So it was still an effective check. And then in 1971, after the war on poverty and the war in Vietnam and all of these expansions of government largesse, we could no longer back our currency with gold. Nixon took us off the gold standard. And we've had monetary chaos, periodic bouts of monetary chaos, really ever since. Of course, we all lived through the 70s and the stagflation and the horrific times. Eventually it came to pass that Paul Volcker was nominated to take over the Fed, and Jimmy Carter, a liberal Democrat, enacted vast free market reforms in the American economy. And under Reagan, the Reagan administrations, we got back to some normality. But of course, we've seen, people taking over our government, in the Democratic Party moving far to the left, and the Republican Party, I'm not sure where they're moving to. And you know, we've gotten into the situation of government out of control, beyond the control of the American people. And I think Americans realize
For certain, that is the gospel at this point.
and I'm very optimistic because I see so many people in Alabama and around the country, my friends, my family, who no longer trust American government. They do not believe, especially at the federal level, that the federal government is looking out to do the best thing possible for the American people. And so
look, besides little Marco wanting to liberate Cuba, and that's the reason for the Venezuela, and you know, we could go into all that. What I want to do is I want to talk about a Republican Congresswoman. Is she a senator? Senator Lisa Murkowski.
Yeah.
Is stepping up a push by GOP leaders saying the invasion of Greenland is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So, Brandon, I know there are sapphires there because it's volcanic, but other than the sapphires, and it being, you know, somewhere we'd like to put Golden Dome missile, that, you know, all China's got to do is crash all their satellites into ours and blind us, and you know, our lives are over with as we know it. But okay, let's just say it's necessary. Golden Dome. You don't think NATO would let us put Golden Dome missiles in Greenland? Of course they would.
Yeah, I mean, the Greenland thing, you know, the national security part of it, I think, is a red herring. Greenland, I mean, we think of it as an island. It's almost as big as the continental United States. If you think of all the coal and iron and oil and gas that we pull out of the territory we control now, can you imagine what all is probably under Greenland if you actually go in there and, you know, explore it? You know, I'm kind of thinking this is a harebrained Trump plan to deal with some of that debt we've accumulated. If you could somehow seize Greenland or buy it, then turn around and exploit whatever minerals are there, you know, whether it's oil or critical earth or gold or silver, I mean, it would give the government a new revenue stream in being able to lease out those resources, not to mention the territorial U.S. water.
The Vikings, it is so inhospitable. The damn Vikings summered there, man. That's like, there's nobody.
It turned cold in about 1300 and they all starved to death. I still don't know why Denmark still has it from then.
Okay,
but,
so
I don't want to be conspiracy theorist guy, but I'm thinking that's the play that has got the Trump White House all into this.
You just stole all the oil in Venezuela. What other market input do we need? And by the way, you know, when all the prices went up, it was because the cost of energy went up. And now that the cost of energy is going down, you know, it still costs $32 to go to Five Guys.
Well, can you imagine what we'll do to the oil deal if we successfully topple Iran and put in a U.S. friendly government there, where all of a sudden that oil hits, you know, the global. Right now, there's all kinds of sanctions on Iran, so you've got to, you know, move it to third-party countries, and, you know, I mean, basically launder the oil or sell it to Russia. And I think China should become the dominant global power economically if they continue on their their course. I kind of think Xi's a little bit too communist and not enough, Deng Xiaoping for them. He's kind of slowed their economy down. But I'm kind of thinking Trump is sort of trying to triangulate them. If we have the resources of Venezuela in our sphere of influence, and we already have Saudi Arabia more or less in our sphere of influence, if you throw in Iran, you throw in Greenland,
Brandon,
it gets
empire
difficult for
doesn't
China and
work.
Russia necessarily to compete, especially China. Russia's got a lot of oil reserves on their own.
The one thing we got going for us is we have a cohesive continental United States that gives us identity. When you start getting it, ask the British. None of this works. Empire doesn't work. It does.
I kind of think.
Be...
I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just trying to put a rational argument as to what I think they're doing, because they're not what they say. Is not necessarily always truthful.
Because it came out of the State Department. Yeah, I'd say it's just.
Yeah, the thing about Venezuela, and especially about Greenland, is it's going to take years before any of those resources make any kind of dent in anything that's related to the United States or world markets. I mean, especially Greenland, you're a decade away before you can even think about production plans, and in Venezuela, several years away before you can think about increasing oil production. I mean, I think Venezuela is a mid-year election kind of ploy, and the Greenland thing, I think, is more like a Trump legacy that Trump wants to add to the United States, to expand the United States, specifically in his name. I'm sure he'd probably want to rename Greenland into Trumpland or something, in keeping with, his bravado. But we've got to realize that aside from Iran, that new sources of resources are not going to be forthcoming from either Colombia or certainly Greenland for many, many years to come. And it's not going to be able to put a dent, although eventually it will, but it's not going to be able to put much of a dent in the fact that our natural resources in the world economy, specifically how much metals have risen, but I also anticipate energy beyond uranium. Uranium is already increased in price, but I think oil, natural gas, and coal are right behind. And then eventually, and this is good news for Alabama, I think, is that the grain products of, things like soybeans and corn and cotton will eventually follow in terms of higher commodity prices. I think all of that is forthcoming, largely because we've underinvested in our natural resources because of environmental policy and dictates under previous presidents, which have downplayed especially the extractive industries in terms of metals, which is an environmental no-no, and energy, which is also an environmental no-no. But we've underinvested in those things compared to the rest of the world. So we're going to have to play a lot of catch up in those industries and in those areas. And as we watch the prices of those inputs increase along with the monetary metals.
Well, I would like to interject some levity, gentlemen.
Okay.
And I would like to go over the new specifications for the Trump-class guided missile battleship.
Yeah, we did an article on that at the Gazette.
It is adorned with the golden Trump figurine on the bow. for good measure, a driving range on the deck, a Rosie O'Donnell seeking missile, a hallway line with past naval admirals with plaques comparing their accomplishments to those of President Trump, state-of-the-art gaydar, J.D. Vance meme on the hull for Trump for crew amusement, a big beautiful ballroom, a full-service McDonald's, a flux capacitor for traveling back in time to Pearl Harbor, and an MS-13 slave gallery. I love it. I think we can win the battle. Of course, we're never going to build this, and since we have destroyers and carriers, we haven't built a battleship in a long time. Now,
well, it's not really a battleship. I mean, it's actually a battle cruiser, because the difference between a battle cruiser and a battleship in World War II parlance was that, the battleships had a armor plate so they could supposedly take gunfire.
a broadside.
And, the battle cruisers, like the Hood, which went down spectacularly against the Bismarck, have no armor belt protection. They just have the guns.
Well, you know what? Nothing can survive.
Pick up some speed.
It doesn't matter what it's built out of. If
yeah, I mean, what made the armor belt deal is a bomb drops onto the deck. He doesn't hit it in the in the side where the belt is.
Well, Tucker Carlson is reporting that Russia is actively considering using nuclear weapons against Europe, meaning Great Britain, France, all our NATO allies. If this foolishness
Does Russia
in Ukraine
have any
continues.
play left other than to threaten the world with nuclear weapons?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but it was you ought to go watch it. I mean,
most of the weapon systems they're deploying in Ukraine were developed by the Soviet Union when I was a child. They're getting hopelessly behind technologically, so some aging nuclear weapons is really the only threat they have left. I mean, if Europe would ever actually militarize, rather than relying on the U.S. to back them up, they could walk all the way to Moscow.
So anyway, Lindsey Graham appears, like the rest of the neocons, disappointed that President Trump is refusing to bomb Iran. I kept thinking that was coming just like on Tuesday night,
I thought it was about to happen.
Yeah, me too. Brandon and I were like going to put a small wager on this thing. I can't believe that hadn't kicked off, and maybe this is a bunch of bullshit. And this is the kind of stuff they put on CNN right before they started bombing the shit out of Baghdad, right? And
they didn't,
Bernard Shaw and Anderson Cooper just happened to be in the Baghdad Hilton when it all kicked off too, right? So have y'all seen this? As more of these documents come out, it turns out Air America was moved to Ohio, and it was one of Mr. Wexler's companies. Anyway, it turns out that Mr. Epstein was heavily involved in moving money around during the Iran-Contra and a whole lot of other things. And instead of us talking about this, we're talking about Venezuela and Greenland and all this other stuff. And I just didn't want us to miss out on some really good reporting by some people that know what they're talking about. Well, but all these people that did business with him aren't. I mean, my Uncle Tom was on the Clinton Global Initiative board with him. You bet your ass I ran him through Chat GPT to see if he was on the Lolita Express or not. So ICE taps new surveillance tech as Trump cuts down privacy protections. And at the same time, I thought we'd bring it back down to home here. Baldwin County community installs more public safety cameras. So are you familiar with the flock camera system, being a libertarian?
Not the specific technologies and that sort of thing, but I'm very leery of what's going on these days. I mean, my pet name for artificial intelligence is automated surveillance, because I think that's the primary purpose of AI, is not productivity and business and
Yeah, it
all
records all your
efficiency.
interest, all your thoughts, the whole nine
Yeah,
yards.
I think it's all about surveillance and of the American population and the ability to basically control and to take people offline and off of social media, and that sort of thing. So I'm very concerned about all of this stuff, especially at the federal level, especially with these high-tech executives and what they're really up to and their whole mentality. Of things.
Palantir is the name of the damn Eye of Sauron, where they can spy on everybody. That's really what he named his company, Palantir.
Yeah.
I mean, like right in the open, he tells you what he's up to. Okay, so everybody's aware that this lady in Minnesota was shot and killed by an ICE agent, and there are all kinds of protests. Well, just in time to screw up that narrative, this guy in San Antonio like tries to ram everybody in the parking lot with his car, and he finally runs.
The officer that killed that woman, he suffered internal injuries and internal bleeding where her car hit his torso.
Well, I don't know anything about it, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut and let
let law enforcement
powers that be do their
what
thing.
actually happened. But it looks like a justified shooting based on what we can know now.
But you're always on that side, Brandon, and I'm always on the other side.
It usually is that way.
Well, it usually
is. Or something.
Okay, so Brandon Mosley was in the room for the State of the State address, and not to belabor everything, Brandon, but I did catch a few minutes of it. She again almost collapsed during a coughing fit.
Well, there was a scary 3 minutes of coughing that, but again, she's a lung cancer survivor in her 80s. So, that she can give a speech still is impressive to some point.
Well,
and she was kind of stretching out here to read that teleprompter a little closer, but.
So the legislative session has begun. They have 30 legislative days. They've burned how many?
3.
And of course, if anybody wants to keep up with all that, they can go to the Alabama Gazette right here. And Brandon has, I don't know, you throw up probably 5-6 articles a day when you're covering the legislature.
Yeah, if we could ever figure out what we're doing with Iran and Venezuela and Greenland and Russia and Ukraine, we could focus more on the legislature, which probably affects more of us in the short term. But
so Brandon,
Alabama and Auburn NIL.
So Brandon, are you familiar with this new law that Commissioner Elliott is discussing?
Yes, I am.
Why don't you let Mark in on the particulars, because I think I probably ought to stay out of it.
Yeah, you probably don't need to say anything here. You and a city councilman in Bay Minette, somebody pushed somebody. There's 2 different accounts on that one. And they're saying you assaulted the councilman. And so now where it was, what was a misdemeanor, misdemeanor under the Elliott legislation will be felony assault, because attacking a privileged person, i.e., an elected official, is more serious than attacking Brandon, the journalist.
Our jobs make us a target sometimes, said Alabama State Senator Chris Elliott, Republican of Josephine, the sponsor of the legislation that would add politicians to a list of protected professions. Under the proposal, the assault against someone in one of those roles would be a Class C felony, punishable by 10 years in prison. Okay? 10 years. Wow. You could imagine I was much taken aback to see that was the headline this morning on AL.com.
Well,
and it sure seems like John Sharp could have gone to Alicourt and seen that my arraignment for my trial de novo in front of a jury in circuit court is set on the 28th of January, and I haven't been convicted of anything.
Changing the topic ever so slightly, well, we've got Professor Thornton on here. Trump is, we covered this very briefly, proposing a cap on credit card interest rates at 10%. I mean, I'm not the brightest bulb on the planet, but if I can invest my billions that I don't have in T-bonds.
Usury?
I mean, T-bonds that are guaranteed by the federal government, I know you can get a 6% T-bill or muni bond. Why would I risk doing credit cards to Bob and Jimmy with just a 3.5% return better? I mean, I despise 27 and 28 and 29% credit card rates. But if you actually do a 10% rate, will anybody get credit anymore from those companies?
Yeah, that's a great point, Brandon. I despise what government has done to the American mindset with respect to savings, which it's basically made savings incredibly difficult, if not impossible, almost stupid to save, and how they've made it very lucrative to borrow money. And so Americans, I mean, now you can get these apps and these cards where you can order chicken wings delivered to your house and have it put on credit, and you make payments over, the next 6 months. So I completely bemoan that whole attitude. But what the price control, the government intervention that President Trump is contemplating here would basically strip many Americans from having credit cards entirely. It's not like these credit card companies are going to continue to let poor credit risk Americans, and there's a lot of them who have credit cards, and they're simply not going to allow people to use credit cards. They're going to force people to be converted over to prepaid cards and debit cards. And of course, a lot of Americans, a lot of Alabamians are not banked. They don't have traditional banking setup services. But this cap on interest rates means that credit card companies can't possibly recruit all of the money, all of the risk. And right now, of course, credit card borrowers, the people who are using credit cards and building up a lot of debt, they are, failing to pay in ever increasing amounts, in ever increasing numbers right now. And I'm totally deplore that situation. And I would like the opportunity to reverse all of that. But, capping credit card interest rates is going to pull the rug out from underneath a lot of low and middle income families in Alabama and around the United States. So this is another election ploy by Trump. The 50-year mortgage, he just throws things out there. And I don't believe the Congress would ever allow that idea to pass because the banks and the credit card companies, Visa and MasterCard, Capital One, they're all, very heavily represented.
They're all paid up.
They're all paid up big time. Yeah.
Big time. Well, so
that's not going to pass.
So 2 years ago, the Alabama legislature essentially repealed Section 93 and 94 of the Constitution of 1901, and it was a provision that said that the state can't lend its credit to a private individual or private enterprise. And then they started these little enterprise zones where local economic development boards could issue debt or give incentives or do these types of things. So one of the first little projects we're going to have, of course, is going to be to give $8 million in tax incentives to the biggest real estate development firm in Baldwin County to build a multi-million-dollar, $35 million hotel across the street from where they have this monstrosity of a facility already. So that's what we got going on down here in economic development. You know, you can kill small children in the name of economic development in Alabama. So after all these Republicans were going to do something very libertarian and get rid of the ABC board, we then put them in charge of hemp-derived cannabinoids. And then they effed all that up, and all these hemp stores are closed because they can't get a license because nobody will tell them where to apply. I mean, it's just, this is a failed state. Look at the prison system, look at it's a failed state. I did want to say goodbye and burn in hell, you no good son of a bitch. Aldrich Ames died. There's no telling how many undercover CIA assets were murdered because of this man's greed. And do you know how he got away with it? You know how he got away with it? Because he started the rumor that his wife was rich. So whenever he showed up with a Porsche, they go, "Oh yeah, his wife's a Colombian, or her dad's a minister of cocaine or something down there." So anyway, yeah, good riddance, man. So last night I went to a campaign kickoff for our county commission, District 2 Commissioner Matt McKenzie. He is a retired state trooper, and he is going to try to take on the cabal and run for sheriff down here. Our former sheriff is now the head of the Alabama Sheriff's Association. That tells you what kind of cabal he's up against. Anyway, there's my sweet thing. And we were at the little wing ding last night at Oak Hollow Farms. Former police chief who was indicted and accused of whatever it was, forgery or possession of a forged instrument. They ruined his life, charged him, waited till the day of the trial in September and dropped all charges against him. So now that he's a free man and his name's been cleared, he's going to run for county commission and, I guess try to make a difference. We'll see. Did y'all see where this disorderly conduct case against Fairhope No Kings? So they thought this guy was dressed up as a penis protester, but it's actually a Fairhope police officer arresting State Senator Chris Elliott for DUI. That's an old photo. Do y'all see the resemblance?
Yeah, I kind of missed that one there, Harry.
Yeah. So anyway, disorderly conduct, No Kings, penis protester, taken down by Fairhope Police Department. I can't believe we missed that one. All right, guys. Well, we are out of time. Brandon, is there anything else that you would like to add about the legislative session or anything coming up?
Oh, we've got, obviously we're increasing the death penalty. So, if you rape a child under the age of 12, the state will have the option of having you executed. We previously had that, back in the day, but there was like an anti-death penalty push. And, federal courts, limited what you could execute people for. We're going to pass this. Kay Ivey made it a point of emphasis. I think Matt Simpson is carrying it in the House and April Weaver in the Senate. That is coming down the line. That should move pretty quickly in this session.
Hey, I want to make one correction. The 8th Amendment against cruel and unusual punishment has been in the Constitution for quite some time. So there wasn't some push. There was a recognition that
it was a reinterpretation that was a cruel and unusual punishment for child rapists in the 70s and 80s. But
1977 case, and it didn't happen in New York. It happened in Georgia.
Yeah. Well,
judge.
The federal judge ruled that. They're hoping a more conservative, Supreme Court will overturn that Again, Steve Marshall is on a pace to oversee more death sentences than any attorney general in Alabama history. And I guess that's where we want to go moving forward.
Okay, well, hey, like I said, we can waste our money fighting windmills if you'd like, but I think this is pretty settled law, and all these people know it. And it's like you said, it's like the 10% credit card rate. It's an election year.
Issue.
It's an election year. Okay, well, thank you so much, Professor Thornton. We really appreciate your insights. And next time I'm in Auburn, I'll take you out for a lemonade. Fair enough?
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to let your audience know that we have lots to offer the average citizen in terms of our webpage, which is the #1 economic webpage in the world. And we have books and articles, audio, video, lectures. We have conferences for the general public and students of all sorts. Our 2 off-site conferences this year outside of Auburn are in Oklahoma City and San Antonio, Texas, which probably tells you a little something about us and our audience. And right now we're giving away free copies of this book by Friedrich Hayek, who was Mises's student, and he won the Nobel Prize in economics for his work on the business cycle. And he came out of retirement in the 1970s to help fight inflation in the United States. And he was the intellectual economic backbone for the likes of President Ronald Reagan and Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. So this is a book, not very long, of his greatest hits articles. And you can go to our webpage. There's a link where you can either download a copy of the book or just write us and we'll send you a hardback copy or copies of the book.
Well, I'm sure our listeners will take you up on it, and there is a look at the website, and you go there to their library link. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Brandon. Hang in there. Don't let them get you down in Montgomery, man.
Hey, I'm here for whatever happens.
Just like in any other field, people like to take sides in economics. The most important debate between Keynesian economist and Austrian economist is related to the role the state should play in society. Keynesians believe the state should intervene whenever the economy isn't doing well. On the one hand, it can do so through fiscal policy such as government spending on infrastructure. On the other hand, it can also intervene through monetary policy, by reducing interest rates or even creating money. Keynesians believe markets aren't always efficient and that when the private sector stops spending due to fear, the state needs to intervene and fill that gap. Austrian economics, on the other hand, revolves around the assumption that markets are very efficient and that government intervention does more harm than good. Austrian economists believe that when the private sector stops spending, it does so because imbalances in the system need to be corrected. They don't necessarily consider a financial crisis something bad that needs to be stopped through state intervention. Instead, they believe that a financial crisis is kind of like bitter medicine. It may not taste great, but it's good for you. Which side, if any, are you on?